Welcome to Leadership Live. I'm Daphna and this is a podcast for leaders like you who want practical tips to apply in leading your business, your people, and yourself. Now, I know that leadership is a skill that can be learned, and this podcast is about doing just that. Every week, I'll talk about what really works. You'll learn to shift your mindset and practice from being good at what you do to getting great at leading people who are good at what they do so that you can get the business results that you want. Whether you're a first-time manager, entrepreneur, or seasoned executive, you're at the right place. This podcast takes you from talented expert to extraordinary leader. So get ready to master your mindset, inspire your team, and elevate your business. Today, we are talking about decision making. Decision making is a really important topic. It's critical in any area of life or in every area of life, and especially in leadership. Now, in regular times, it's not easy to make decisions. And in times of crisis, it becomes even more difficult and complicated. And in fact, we are faced with even more decisions that we need to make, and even more tough decisions. So let's look at this. What happens with decision making? What do we need to be aware of? What are the kind of pitfalls and challenges, and how can we overcome them? And I'm actually going to make it specific about crisis times where emotions are heightened and everything is so much more stressful or challenging. And all of these things apply in normal, regular situations as well. And I have to say that it's really great to see how restrictions are being loosened. We're starting to get a taste of what it's like to go back to our regular life, to seeing life on the streets, work starting up again for many of us. I know not for all of us, but for many of us, things are starting to fall into a more regular routine. And the whole aspect of decision making becomes critical here as well. So even in this transition phase. So the first thing I want to look at when we look at decision making is really, where does it begin? So decision making really starts in our brain. When we need to make a decision, when we're under stress, so in times of crisis, we know, and I've spoken before about how our brain works and our automated default responses that lie in our limbic system, which we know about. Those are the fight, flight, or freeze response. When we're under stress, and we need to make a decision, we usually tend to go into that gut feel, knee-jerk response space where we either fight for something or we just let it go, we freeze, or we try to run away if we can and can't always avoid it. So then what do we do with that? How do we mitigate that instinctive response that makes us just want to act in a knee-jerk way without giving it too much thought? So the first tip for today is to really slow that down. When we know that we're in a crisis situation and we know that we're under stress and we're facing a decision, a tough decision, a big decision, or even a small decision, we really need to take a step back, slow it all down before we act on any decisions. So a great tip I'm going to give you here is to write down your gut response. Just write down whatever's coming up for you, whatever it is that you feel that might be the way that you want to act, and then put it aside and leave it for at least 24 hours. If you need to make a quick decision, leave it for an hour. Consult with people, talk to trusted advisor, a coach, a colleague, your spouse, anyone that you really feel that you can trust in the moment. Make sure to give yourself some gap between the knee-jerk response and the action, and then go back to it after. So just make sure that you slow it down, calm down your limbic system, and give yourself an opportunity to engage your thinking brain and your cognitive regions of the brain. So something that's really great, if you can and if you have the time, is to sleep on it. So, that old saying of let's sleep on this, it's really, really valuable. And especially when we're in times of stress and crisis and we need to make a decision. So that was our first area of the brain, looking at the limbic system and our instinctive response. The second area of the brain is the area that holds our resources. Okay, so we have a part of the brain that actually is responsible for refueling us. So it's almost like if you could picture a bucket of resources that gives us energy to last throughout the day. And how these resources get replenished is through good sleep, exercise, healthy habits, healthy eating, emotional well-being, mental stimulation, all the things that give us energy and bring us joy and fulfillment in our lives are those things that help to refuel the brain. When we're getting low on those resources in our brain, so if you think of the bucket, as we go through our day and deal with all sorts of things, whether it's making decisions about what to eat for breakfast or getting over a conflict situation with a colleague or a team member, or whether it's a fight with our spouse, our bucket gets used up, our resources get used up. So when we run low, it's very difficult to make decisions again. So you know the saying that goes, never make a decision when you're angry. I add to that, never make a decision when you're angry or hungry. Okay, so for those of us who have kids, I certainly have the experience that when my kids were hungry, they were really, really difficult to reason with. And that's purely because that sits in our brain. When we are hungry or when we have heightened emotions, angry, sad, disappointed, when something has really affected us emotionally, our resources get taken up, and it's very difficult for us to make wise decisions in those moments. So if in a moment of anger, you want to go walk into your boss's office and quit your job, not a good idea. Again, we want to slow all of that down, allow our cognitive brain to kick in, allow ourselves to have a good night's sleep, and then make a decision when we can think about it more rationally. Now, when we're under times of stress, like in these times, and this is prolonged, our sleep suffers, our eating suffers, our activity and exercise suffers. Even for those of us who consider ourselves more relaxed or less stressed about the situation, there is still a low level of stress that goes on. So our resources are not at optimal levels. So the first thing to do is to make sure that what you are in control of and what you can do, make sure to do, like sleep, get your hours of sleep. That's really, really important. Eat healthily, make sure that you're keeping a well-balanced diet and exercise. Try and keep that going, even if it's in your own garden. We saw some beautiful stories of people running marathons and ultra marathons in their back garden. Huge respect for you guys. I don't know how you did it, but people are doing that. And that's really important to keep our energy up, to keep our brain refueled. So then we have to make those tough decisions. We really have the resources that we need in order to keep going. And then the third element I want to talk about is something that I think many of us are familiar with, and that is analysis paralysis or even decision fatigue. Okay, I'm going to talk about those two things. And if I just segue here for a moment, what are the kinds of decisions leaders are making right now? They are making critical decisions about hiring policies, hiring freezes, salary cuts. I know many companies, the top executives are taking 30% salary cuts and even more sometimes. And that also means letting go of employees or putting them on furlough. Or how do you actually manage this whole situation when your revenue is down and you have a staff component that you really want to look after? Really, really big questions that are going on. Cost cutting on other levels, programs that need to be cut, incentives that need to be cut, things that just have to now be pared down, expenses that have to be pared down because there's just a lot to consider and times are tough. And then a whole big decision around the strategy and the direction of the business. A lot of businesses are having to shift their message and pivot their branding so that they can offer something different at this time, which I think is really important. So if you're in a business and you need to think about how to do things differently, think innovatively about how to pivot your message, how to reach out to your clients or even your clients' clients so that you can continue to serve in some way, those are also critical decisions. So lots of decisions that are being made at the moment, which gets us into that analysis paralysis brain. That is definitely something we can identify with, and that is exhausting. What else? It's not only exhausting, it also keeps us stuck. Analysis paralysis means that we don't take any action. We stay in that loop or cycle of rationalizing the pros and the cons and gathering data and looking for information and speaking to 101 people. And speaking to people is great, but everything has to be measured. As soon as we have this overload of information coming at us, it's very difficult to see our way through, and it's also difficult to make that call and to move forward to know what the right thing is to do. So the tip I'm going to give you on that is to actually make a call. And the thing with that is that if you get into the habit, if you don't make a decision, so you stay in this analysis paralysis, you get into the habit of over-analyzing, you'll end up not making a decision, which in a way is a decision as well. But anyway, if you land up not making a decision, you land up with a habit of inaction. You're reinforcing this analysis paralysis, always finding an argument or a rational reason for not deciding, and it keeps you stuck. It doesn't keep you moving forward. And that, when you get into a habit of inaction, does not create results, because if we want to see results, we need to get into action. So sometimes making the wrong decision is better than staying in that habit of inaction, stuckness, lack of traction, lack of moving forward, and lack of getting results. So we don't want that to be part of it. Now, I know that sometimes that lack of action or that indecision comes from really tough decisions that we have to make. And I've been speaking to quite a few clients who are really looking at, maybe needing to let people go at this time. And it's a very, very difficult time to let people go. And that is something that might need to be done and can also be done with a level of compassion. So my tip for you there is to ask yourself, when you're looking at a tough decision like that, like letting someone go, what would your decision be if you weren't in a time of crisis? Would your decision be any different? Are you letting them go because you need to cut costs, but they're a really good performer? Or are you letting them go because they're actually a poor performer? This has been brewing for a very long time, and now your business just can't hold this anymore. And in fact, what happens with poor performers or people that are not delivering is that in times of crisis with the added stress, they actually perform even worse. So ask yourself that question, because certainly with the people I've been speaking to, often when I ask them that question, they say, actually, the poor performance has been going on for a long time and it's something that needed to be done. But this situation has really forced their hand in terms of we need to cut costs. So the thing there is to do it with compassion. See how you can help them to get through this period. You can still be a kind leader that needs to make tough decisions. And letting people go is always a tough decision, really, from my experience of working with leaders. It really, really never gets easy to do that. Okay, the fourth thing that I want to look at, and I will summarize at the end, is that when it comes to decision making, and this is probably the most important tip I want to leave you with today, and that is always go back to who you are, your core values, your purpose, why you are in the situation that you're in, and what is it that you want to achieve. Make sure that whatever decision you make is fully aligned with who you are as a leader, what your values are, that you stay true to yourself, that you walk the talk, that you live your purpose, because that is your stake in the ground. That is your centered place where you know that when decisions come from that, they come from a place of integrity, and they will likely be the right decisions, and you'll need to take action on them. That's number 4. And number 5, I really just want to address the issue of what's happening now. As restrictions are being loosened a little bit for people, and we now need to be making a decision about going back to work, sending our children back to school, visiting the shops. Do we go as a group? Do we get together with people socially, whether it's, I know in some places or many places you still can't, but maybe if it's going for a run with a friend or something like that, do you do that? How to behave in this new normal that we're in transition at the moment, and the decisions we need to make about going out and living our life, wearing a mask, how to wear it, who to see, where to go, how far to stand. Those decisions have become new decisions in our life that we've never really had to deal with before. And the question of, do we even want to go out, even if we're allowed to? My opinion is that through this period where we've been in lockdown for so long, so many decisions about living our day-to-day life have been taken away from us. Our government has decided for us where to go, when to go, how far to go, what to buy, what not to buy, what activities we can do and what activities we can't do. We've been in this bubble of no decision for so long that in some ways and on some levels, our brains and our bodies have got used to not making those decisions for ourselves. So getting back into that is a very difficult thing. It's something that we almost need to relearn. How do we decide for ourselves now? And it's really, really important to make those decisions, make the call. That's what I was saying with analysis paralysis. Sometimes you need to stop and make that call. And make the call based on what's good for you. But I will remind you, my very first point about the limbic system, if you're making that decision out of fear, check in with yourself. Go back to your values. Go back to your centered place. Do some breathing. Relax yourself and then decide what is the right thing for me and my family. And whatever it is, it's okay. So give yourself the time. I think a big lesson from this is slowing down. Don't make decisions out of fear, out of knee-jerk reactions, out of heightened emotions and stress. Make the decisions from a much more calm place, centered place, where you take a step back, slow it down, give yourself a break, a moment to reflect, and then make your decision. Different people have different considerations, different levels of comfort around this thing. So check in with yourself. No one can really tell you what to do. There's a point where, within the parameters of kind of what's legal and what's not, you can also decide for yourself. So let's get back into that mode of making decisions, deciding for ourselves from the right place, from our values, from our integrity. Slow it down, release some of the fear and stress, get yourself into a calm place and making decisions. So my key tips, just some things for dealing with decision making. One thing that's really useful is to write down when you have a gut response or a knee-jerk response that could be fear-based, it could be opportunity-based. I really want to get moving again. Just write down your knee-jerk reaction, your knee-jerk decision. Write it down on a piece of paper and then set it aside. Now, depending on how long you can give yourself when you need to make the decision, if you can give yourself a bit of time, great, set that deadline. I say at least 24 hours if possible. If not, set the deadline and know that you'll come back and make a decision at that time. And in the meantime, you can talk to people, you can have a nap, you can eat some food and get replenished, or go out for a walk, get some exercise. And then you go back and see what you can do. So the key thing is write down your knee-jerk response, slow yourself down, refuel yourself, re-energize, talk to people, talk to a trusted advisor, a coach or a mentor, a colleague or a spouse, anyone that you can trust on this. Seek advice and the opinion of others, but don't overwhelm yourself with that. Give yourself a break. Ask yourself, what would you do? What would the decision be? Would it be different if this wasn't a crisis situation? And then come back to your values, to your place of center, your purpose and your vision, and then make the call at the deadline. When the deadline arrives, you make that call. And remember that making a decision, even if it's the wrong one, is better than no decision. And I'm also going to repeat, never make a decision when you're angry or when you're hungry. It is absolutely about knowing yourself. And sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that, especially when we're feeling stressed or fearful. Always go back to who you are and your values, because that's what drives our decision. Remember, we've got brain chemistry going on, so we've got to be aware of that. So let's calm down some of our stress responses. Let's refuel or build up some of our resources in the brain, come back to our center, and then we'll know that we can make a good decision. We look forward to seeing you next week with another topic. And next week, we're going to be talking about what next. So I feel that we've spent a lot of time on stuff that's related to being in that crisis. And I really feel we're transitioning into the what's next. So next time, that's what we'll be talking about. Thank you so much for joining. As always, have a beautiful day. And this wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. You can head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com, where you can download many resources, including a chapter of my book that will show you how to get through tough times and define a big vision for your leadership and your business. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, and I'd be even more grateful if you'd share it with a friend, leave a review and a 5-star rating so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. Tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.